Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're continuing with our cryptozoological examination of Crites with Critters 2, released in 1988. If you're inured to the power of the feathered mullet, you should subscribe to the channel as it features them heavily. Let's get to it. We open in the fire swamp and observe some intergalactic mercenaries pursuing an unknown threat. One of them allows himself to be pounced upon and inseminated by their bounty in order to briefly distract it to facilitate extermination. We soon see this bumbling idiot as Charlie, now employed in the trade of cosmic murder. As the gang zips through space, they get an emergency alert that a recent G-sweep of planet Earth has revealed trace remnants of the Crite plague, requiring their return. Meanwhile, back on the pale blue dot, we get a little catch-up on what's been going on in Grover's Bend the last 2 years. Brad is returning for the first time since his family left town so he can visit with his Nana. The Brown homestead has been abandoned, only attracting gawkers and looky-loos like the antique dealer Quigley and his e-boy assistant Wesley. They find the one spot no one has explored over the intervening years, and it pays off. They uncover a strange cache of unusual eggs they figure may be worth a couple of bucks on the open market. They get the eggs back to the shop and Wesley takes some beers and a stack of porno mags in payment. As he drives off, one flies off in the wind, waiting in the field for the promise of discovery by some lucky young lad. Later, this grizzled old skag feeds his mutt and looks to give Granny Brown the hookup on some sweet antique eggs for the Easter celebration. She's interested, but she knows how to play the game and guilts him into giving her a good deal. As she walks away with half his stock, the other half basks in the nourishing warmth of his space heater. Back at home, Nana gives her little helper a parting gift of disturbingly unwrapped chocolate candy and a free murder egg. And as everyone settles in for the night, Quigley returns from Saturday service to discover he's a father, and that he can't climb fast enough to avoid being eaten by his progeny, as is nature's method. Then Brad reminisces about the good old days while the girl's egg hatches and the infant Crite is killed by happy accident before it can feed. The next day, the town prepares for its Easter celebration, a tradition that involves forcing the sheriff to become a furry, which he's pretty sour about.
Such a gloomy Gus.
You better shut that smelly mouth. And as they prepare the grounds for what promises to be an Easter massacre, we see that Brad is only made welcome by his old school chum Meg. Everyone else is palpably disturbed by his presence, due to his family history of telling crazy stories about space creatures that eat folks. Outside, the sheriff is getting in some practice when he bends down to observe a hatched egg, and is forcibly entered. He then busts into the service, ensuring no one will ever forget the Easter of '88. The official story is farming accident, with Brad even gaslighting himself by refusing to acknowledge what happened in the last movie. Meg insists he face up to his destiny, and tries to snap him out of it by driving out to get Sheriff Harvey involved. But Harv was voted out and doesn't feel any need to risk his own skin for the townsfolk who turned on him. Meanwhile, the bounty hunters finally touch down, stumbling upon the aforementioned porno, which gives Lee a template to follow, treating us to some incredibly gratuitous alien titties. She then throws off the staple, forcing us to ask, isn't that a part of her body? Meg and Brad roll up to the antique shop for reasons that must have been left on the cutting room floor, and Quigley's like, "'S all good here," before the Crites finish their meal and run them off. They beeline for Nana's, where Brad finds his alien communicator and activates it for immediate bounty hunter service. Then they have a touching reunion, finding Charlie off the sauce and looking healthy as a horse. In town, we learn Crites like to eat, family style, and take such joy in the process they ignore physical pain. So the hunters get their guns nice and erect, and they start spraying these fun-loving goofs. But some do escape and terrorize the general population, forcing most people to retreat to the church where they can cover themselves in the blood of Christ. Back outside the dairy bar, Lee makes a very annoying decision.
Kill more Crites.
Giving us flashbacks of the Polar Express, and they work their way through town, showdown style. This lasts into the night when Charlie finds Lee, again succumbing to his body's need for recombobulation, and prevents her from one terrible mistake, but not another, as she then chases a Crite down a blind alley that's actually full of Crites. They find her remains picked clean to the bone, and the trauma causes Ugg to go blank, so they all retreat to the church. Here we see they're primarily watching the front, leaving the back vulnerable and requiring Brad and a little girl to play tricycle polo for their lives. As they accept imminent death, they're saved by the return of Harv, ready now to rid the town of this menace. In an attempt to play on their strong communal tendencies, Brad suggests they lure them to the burger factory for a fine meal and to explode them. Despite the economic damage inherent in squelching the town's chief export, they load up and roll out. When they arrive, they mix up the strategy outlined, dumping and wafting all that delicious, fatty burger meat prior to setting up the explosive charges. This gives them limited time as the Crites are soon on their way. The townsfolk follow them out, but but the winds shift, putting them in a precarious position. Luckily, the big one espouses the advantage of going boneless over valuing freshness, leading them back in the direction of the factory. Turns out the big one was Ugg, doing his part to ensure the plan's success, and with that they light off the bangers. Their celebration is interrupted by the rumbling of a giant Crite ball that consumes all in its path. They chase it back into town where Charlie kamikazes the thing right at the last moment. Appreciated, but unnecessary because he probably could have just used the blasters. In a somewhat uncomfortable attempt to memorialize his fallen comrade, Ugg then turns himself into Charlie. The next day, as Brad tries to get a kiss without everyone watching, they're interrupted by Charlie's return. He bailed out and apparently spent the night in the woods for fun. He finds himself enamored with his own visage and the erotic possibilities implied, but Ugg beams up without him. Brad gets a little peck and is on his way, and Charlie is then appointed to an elected position by a civilian with no actual authority, in defiance of the democratic process. Ultimately, Critters 2 was a bit rushed. It had more Crite action and more action in general, and stands on its own but probably could have used another draft or two on the script. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.